Hey guys, we're going to continue where we left off with Chapter 22, Section 1. This is going to be the second half of the section. Please have out that same sheet that we've been working on. And this is the Progressive Reform sheet. We're going to be focusing on the economic reforms and also the environmental reform column, so these two columns here. So please take that out. If you don't have that, please download it from Edmodo. I just want to start with a quick review of the essential question for this section. Again, we're trying to answer the question, what kind of problems did progressives attempt to solve? Okay, and also keep in mind that we're also trying to understand what the progressive movement tried to accomplish. And also we're trying to identify specific reforms achieved during the progressive era. So, as I mentioned, we're going to start off with progressive goal number 3. Again, they have three basic major goals. They had a political goal, they had a social goal, and an economic goal. We've already went over some political and social, so we're just going to jump right into some economic reforms that progressives try to achieve. So we know a big problem, and we talked about this, are monopolies and trusts are pretty much taking over the country, right? They have so much power. These robber barons, these captains of industries, these Rockefellers, Carnegies, J.P. Morgans. Then the question is, how do you fix it? Right? We didn't talk about how to fix this problem. We just know that it's a problem. So we've looked at some of these pictures before, and actually we're going to break some of these down again tomorrow. But again, these are some of the problems that America is facing. Right? You can see here, does not look positively upon monopolies and trusts. So how do you fix these problems? That's one of the questions we have to answer. Well, there was a piece of legislature. It was called the Sherman Antitrust Act. And as you guys know, anytime you see the word act, that means it was an act of Congress. So there was some sort of act of Congress which was an antitrust act, meaning it's against trusts. It actually said trusts were illegal. But here's a question I have for you. Whose role is it in our government to enforce laws? Who enforces laws? Hopefully you know that it's the executive branch of our government enforces laws. Who is in charge of our executive branch? The President of the United States. Very good. Okay, so hopefully you guys know that. Now, if the President doesn't enforce the law, then the law is not going to basically work. And what happened is you have this Sherman Antitrust Act law that was never enforced. And why not? Why did no president enforce this Sherman Antitrust Act that actually made it illegal for trusts? Well, the answer is, right here. We're going to break this cartoon down tomorrow in class. There's a lot here. But generally, what I want you guys to take a look at, and let me see if I can get this to work here. Back here, I don't know if you can see it, but it says the Senate. This is the Senate. So we know that this is our Congress, okay? And what you see in this picture are congressmen down here, right? All these guys are congressmen, all right? I don't quite see any congresswomen down here, but that's an issue for another day, okay? All these are congressmen. And then who are these guys? The big fat guys with the top hats who are really, really heavy and bloated, okay? And if you look closely, let me see if this will work. It might not work. That didn't work. All right, you'll see the word trust. 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 T-R-U-S-T. Can't really see it there. Trust. These are the trusts. And basically, what is this cartoonist saying about the power that trusts and monopoly have in our government at this time? Hopefully we can figure that one out on your own, and if not, we'll unpack that tomorrow in class. But this is why presidents weren't enforcing the antitrust law. Look at it right here. And if you can't figure it out, we'll talk about it tomorrow in class. Well, lo and behold, this guy by the name of Teddy Roosevelt, or Theodore Roosevelt, comes along. The way Teddy Roosevelt became president is kind of interesting. In 1900, William McKinley was assassinated after 6 months of being in office, and Roosevelt just happened to be the vice president. As you guys know, if the president shall die while in office, the vice president takes over, and at the age of 42 years old, all right, Teddy Roosevelt becomes the youngest president we had ever had. All right, 42 is very young for a presidential candidate. Okay, he was a very, very, very progressive president. He's going to be involved in moving the country forward or progressing the country. Teddy Roosevelt, I mean, you could spend a whole lesson just on Teddy Roosevelt himself. He was a famous war hero in the Spanish-American War. We're going to talk about the Spanish-American War next chapter. Okay, you guys really don't know what this is yet, but we will talk about this. Very famous war hero. He led this group called the Rough Riders. He was very energetic, very good speaking, kind of like me, strong, kind of like me, active, just like me. He was an outdoor. So basically, I could be very much like Teddy Roosevelt. I'm kidding. But people love this guy, just like me. No. People love Teddy Roosevelt. Very powerful. In fact, he's probably one of the top 3 most liked presidents we have ever had in our country's history. So here's what Roosevelt does. He is going to directly attack the trusts. He says, quote, "When I say I believe in a square deal, I do not mean, and nobody speaks the truth can mean, that he believes it is possible to give every man the best hand. If the cards do not come to any man, or if they come, hold on one second.
Mr. Cooper, you have a phone call in the front office. Mr. Cooper.
Sorry about that. And it has not the power to play them all. That is his affair. All I mean is that there should not be any crookedness in the dealing. No crookedness, right? Everybody should be dealt a square deal. And actually, this was called Roosevelt's square deal. And basically, to sum up this idea, Teddy Roosevelt said it's the role of the government to be the umpire, right? Who enforces laws? The executive branch. The president enforces laws. And that the government needs to be an umpire. The president's job is to make sure that laws are fair. It's not their job to make laws. Again, Congress makes laws. But he's saying that we need to enforce fair laws and make sure it's fair. So, again, the government should be an umpire. It kind of call balls and strikes, illegal, not illegal, all right, and he needs to enforce laws. So what's the impact? The impact of Teddy Roosevelt rolling up his sleeves is basically breaking up trusts. He uses that thing called the Sherman Antitrust Act that was already a law. This was a law, but no president enforced it. And again, why did no president enforce this law? Well, it goes back to that picture we talked about with the big fat guys. Okay, so they break up the trust. It's called the Sherman Antitrust Act. There are 44 trusts in total that Teddy Roosevelt broke up. There you see in that picture, all right, him breaking up those trusts. Again, Teddy Roosevelt, very powerful, very influential. You can see here in this political cartoon, he's wrestling the railroad trust, right? He's got the stars and striped boxer briefs on. Again, he was also known for being a boxer. He was kind of like an all-around kind of Renaissance man, you could say. But this cartoon, he's taking on the railroad trusts. Another famous cartoon of Teddy Roosevelt taking on more trusts. And sorry about that, guys.
Please call the front office on extension 600.
That's what you get when you record a video before school starts. But he's taking on the bad trusts, the good trusts, and things like that. Teddy Roosevelt was also an outdoorman as well. Ida Tarbell, interestingly to know, she was another muckraker, and she tried to take down Rockefeller as well, and exposed the evils of his monopolies and trusts in her book, The History of the Standard Oil Company. Again, she wasn't as influential as Teddy Roosevelt, because Teddy Roosevelt was a president and she was just an author. But again, someone else who's trying to, change how the economy is working, right? A progressive movement. She said this about the Rockefeller. Rockefeller and his associates did not build the Standard Oil Company in the boardrooms of Wall Street banks. They fought their way by rebate and drawback, bribe and blackmail, espionage and spying, and price cutting by ruthless, all right, efficiencies of organization. Basically, she's saying this is how he's controlling basically the economy, all the oil. This is not right. This is not fair. So we're going to kind of wrap up with this quick idea because I'm running out of time and school is actually about to start. Upton Sinclair is an author. He's another muckraker. Okay, again, we talked about muckrakers. This guy wrote a very famous book, and we're going to read about this book in class. Okay, the book was called The Jungle, right here. And in this book, The Jungle, he writes about the disgusting, grotesque nature of what the meat packing industry was like in America at the turn of the century. It is absolutely gross and disgusting. You may never want to eat hamburgers or sausage or any type of meat pack before ever again in your entire life. And again, the meat packing industry today, it's a very basic process. Let's just say you take sausage, for example. You start with different types of meat. You chop up the meats. You put in your seasoning. So here it looks like salt, maybe some breadcrumbs, whatever. You dice that all up in this big industrial thing. And then you take these caissons and you press the meat through this kind of whatever this device is here. And it kind of makes the sausage links. As the links come out, you twist the links and you have sausages. Well, I'll give you a little hint as to what was found in these plants. And it's right there. Yeah, it's pretty disgusting, this story, how dead rats were being thrown into this meat. Literally poison that was put out to kill the dead rats was thrown into this meat as well. It's absolutely disgusting. We're going to read about, we're going to actually read a piece of his book in class tomorrow. Two things to come out of Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, believe it or not, something called the Meat Inspection Act. Basically, the government is going to inspect all meat sold to the public. Today, this act is still enacted. You might have seen this USDA choice or grade A or stamps on meat before, and also something called the Pure Food and Drug Act. The Pure Food and Drug Act is going to create something called the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. They are an agency that inspects all foods and medicines. In fact, you might have heard of Coca-Cola. Do you know why Coca-Cola is called Coca-Cola? Because it used to have cocaine in it. Yes, it's true. Cocaine was once used as a medical substance to treat people in the U.S., but people didn't realize that cocaine was highly, highly addictive. So eventually the FDA, this new organization, pulled cocaine off the racks and said you can't prescribe cocaine to people for their sicknesses. And in fact, Coca-Cola, you can't put cocaine in your drink product because it's not a safe product. We'll talk more about the FDA. They do play an important role in our everyday lives, believe it or not, still to this day. And because of the progressive movement and the progressive era, this act, this law, the Pure Food and Drug Act, it's an act of Congress, which created the FDA, still exists today. Finally, and last but not least, that last column on your list, environment. Teddy Roosevelt was a huge conservationist. Conservation basically means protecting the environment and conserving natural resources like wood, oil, anything that comes from the earth that we use as a resource. There's this one guy, his name was John Muir. He was kind of like a muckraker for the environment. Here he is standing right next to Teddy Roosevelt. Roosevelt was a very green president, meaning he loved the environment. And one thing under the president of Teddy Roosevelt is you see more national parks being reserved. Okay, these little blue areas all over this map are national parks, and they don't look very big, but trust me, these things are huge. Okay, and these national parks are lands that cannot be touched by anyone. No building, no housing, no development, nothing like that can go on there. In fact, under Roosevelt's presidency, 200 million acres of land were set aside. He doubled the amount of national parks, and he was able to get Congress to pass something called the Antiquities Act. Okay, if you look at the word antiquities, you see the word antique, right? If you think about what an antique is, it's something that's special, that you save, you protect, right? You don't eat on the antique table. You kind of keep the antique table aside. You don't take, grandma's old antique glasses and use them for dinner. No, you keep them safe and you kind of protect them, right? So the Antiquities Act, Teddy Roosevelt again was instrumental in Congress passing this law, is going to protect certain things, certain landmarks in America, and kind of call them antiques or antiquities. like the Grand Canyon. Okay, Teddy Roosevelt is able to get Congress to pass this law